Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful game that pretty much everyone is always interested to see. It is Daniel Naroditsky versus Magnus Carlsen from the title Tuesday yesterday, and it's a 3-minute game, but it features some incredible lines. I know you guys said that I say incredible all the time, but I'm not going to show you a game that's not incredible. That would be silly. And okay, I usually categorize games three different ways. There are games that you just, even your uncle sees and he will be like, okay, this is a great game. Then there are those games that, some pawns are being pushed, nothing is really happening. But then when you actually see the lines that were avoided because of those pawn moves, then you're like, wow, this is even more beautiful than that first game. And then there's the third category, which is, I think, the finest of all, such as, the Immortal game. That has beautiful moves that your uncle can appreciate, and also beautiful moves that were never, far from ever being played. So I think this falls into the third category, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. I could make it 10 pause the video moments. I could make it 3. We'll see. It's still deciding while I'm making the video. So let's check it out. Daniel with white opens with pawn to e4. Magnus plays pawn to c5. Knight to f3. We have pawn to d6. And Magnus goes for bishop to b5 check. The canal attack. We have knight to d7. And you could block also with knight to c6. You could block with bishop to d7. All three are, very, very possible for black. Castles kingside and pawn to a6, chasing away the bishop, and we have bishop to d3. This is by far the best retreating square for the bishop. You might think, okay, let's play bishop c4 as you want to sacrifice on f7 at some point, because that's how you play chess. But then your opponent just plays b5. You're going to go, let's say, bishop e2, knight gf6, and black has a very, very nice setup. And you can no longer claim that you have any sort of advantage that you had due to the first move. So here, bishop to d3, knight g to f6, and rook to e1. We have pawn to b5 and pawn to c4. You can see that the Magnus burning a little bit more time. They started with 3 minutes. Naroditsky pretty much pre-moving every move. Magnus goes pawn to b4 and pawn to a3. And here there are some games that reach this position. For example, b captures on a3 is a known move. Pawn to e5 is a known move. Bishop to b7 is a known move. Magnus goes rook to b8, and it is now as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. And this is where things become incredibly interesting. Look at this. A captures on b4. Magnus plays rook, captures on b4. And now it seems like Daniel is in a bit of a trouble here because he can't really develop with his bishop on d3. On the other hand, there's really no good square for the bishop because you really like your bishop on this diagonal, adding more protection to this e4 pawn. So he plays bishop back to c2 pretty much instantly. And I'm guessing he knew this line because what happens next, maybe he has like this incredible clairvoyance or maybe he just knew the line. But if Magnus captures the pawn on c4, I absolutely have to show you what happens. Because after rook captures on c4, okay, you attack the rook, knight a3. Okay, the rook goes back, you don't mind, you just won a pawn. Pawn to d4. Okay, still nothing spectacular. You play c captures on d4. Now bishop d2 attacks your rook. Okay, you can go back. You just captured not 1 but 2 pawns. And all of a sudden bishop to a4. And black really has nothing to play here. You could just continue the game. You could play pawn to e6, let's say, play bishop e7 and hope to castle. But knight captures on d4, and after bishop to e7, there's this knight to c6. Okay, you might think, well, still, nothing really happening. My queen is attacked. Well, let's just move the queen. All of a sudden, knight to bishop to a5 happens, attacks the black queen. Let's say queen to b7, and now knight to c4. And, okay, you played some moves, but you still have no moves. You cannot castle. The bishop on e7 would hang, and there's just no good move that you can play. If you play a silly move like pawn to h6, then you lose on d6, and that's it. It'd be great if you could play bishop to d8, but you can't, because then bishop captures on d6 also forks the king and the queen. So this would be a resignation amidst a Zugzwang, I believe. So yeah, maybe he just sees that far, or maybe it's a known line. I don't know, but it is beautiful. So Magnus plays pawn to e6 and sort of blunders the game. Daniel does not pick up on it. You have to strike with pawn to d4. Daniel played pawn to b3. But it's interesting that you know this is a position where you just have to happily sacrifice everything with white. You play pawn to d4. I will have to show this is the second big line of the video that I'm going to show. And after c captures on d4, you again attack the rook, and now your rook even captures on b2. Interestingly, in the line that I've just shown you, the previous one, I played all the top engine moves for black, and it still made no difference. And here, for example, bishop to e5, you attack the queen, no problem. Queen e7, knight captures on d4. Okay, knight c5, you have some moves here, knight to c3, and now after pawn to g6, because how else are you developing? Let's say pawn to g6, you have bishop to a4 check, and after bishop d7, knight c6. Attack the queen, and take the d8 square is not available, so you have to capture, and then bishop captures with check. You have to block with the knight, let's say knight f to d7, and now look at this, knight to d5. I mean, just disgusting. Where you cannot open up the DE file, you're just getting destroyed here. So you would have to move the queen, and now bishop c3. Look at this. Both rooks are undefended, and again, nothing to play. You can give up some material because you want material, obviously. You can play something like bishop to h6, but you can capture on d7 with check. Even better, knight captures. You're going to go knight to c7 with check, king to d8, and now you just gobble up a nice juicy rook. Let's say rook g8, and now rook captures on a6. You can even sacrifice the knight, and the black is getting checkmated. The king captures, rook a7 check, whatever you play. Let's say king to d8, queen captures on d6, and there's no defense, as you're either getting checkmated on d7 or rook to a8 will be checkmate. So interestingly, bishop to c2 starts all of this business, but then Magnus replies pawn to e6, and then Daniel does not find pawn to d4. He plays pawn to b3, and okay, now Magnus continues developing bishop to e7 and also blunders the game. This is still very much a critical position. Magnus has to bring the rook back or play something like knight to e5, but after bishop to e7, now most of the lines that we've discussed come back alive. Pawn to d4, we have c captures bishop to d2. Attacking the rook, Magnus goes back, rook to b8, and now bishop to a5, and Magnus is in huge trouble here. We have knight to b6, knight captures on d4, and the question is always the eternal one. Can I castle now? Well, no, you can't. The c6 square is undefended, and you're just going to lose a lot of material here. So Magnus plays queen to c7, knight to c3, and now again you might be thinking, well, now certainly is the time to castle, but castling now runs into some nasty knight to a4, and then you're gonna spend the entire game basically fighting against this. So bishop to d7 first, and now of course not knight to a4, but now knight to d5. And this isn't even the best move. It's best just to continue with pawn to f4. But knight d5 is the most creative way to fight, and obviously facing a player like Magnus brings out the most creative version of oneself. So e captures on d5, e captures, and now Magnus has to unpin because he's not castling anytime soon. King to f8 and queen to f3, and this is beautifully played by Daniel. He sacrificed a piece and he just continues development in the style of the great attackers of the past. Bishop to d8 by Magnus. He doesn't want that bishop to be a target here, and also he wants to be able to unpin so the knight is sufficiently defended. We have knight to c6. Maybe you don't have to capture it, but allowing that knight to remain there, what are you even playing? So Magnus does capture it. It is by far the best move. D captures, and now Magnus plays pawn to h5. He wants to create some breathing room for his king before he gets the rook into the game. But now pawn to b4. Now and always the best move there is in the position, threatening pawn to c5 to win material here. So Magnus has to unpin, and now queen e3, pinning the knight right back. And here, if you go knight c8, which seems like a perfectly fine move, it just loses on the spot. Captures, and c7, and okay, you resign here. So after queen to e3, rook to c8 by Magnus, and pawn to b5. Now the other pawn marches forward. a captures on b5, and pawn to b4. Here, interestingly, c captures on b5. You just defend your passed pawn, and that's definitely the best. But Daniel played bishop to b4, and now Magnus has a chance to get back into the game. He plays queen to b8, and now he plays c captures on b5, which was by far the best move a move ago. Now it sort of loses the game. Now Magnus is just winning. To give you an example, you have to play rook a7 here. It looks like a silly move, but white is no longer playing for a win. White is playing for a draw, and you have to give up that rook in order to just not to lose the game. So queen captures on a7. Now you can capture on d6 with check, and your only move is bishop to e7, because if you go back, then white happily sacrifices a queen, and it's checkmate, compliments of our good friend the bishop on d3. So here you would have to play bishop to e7, or rather after bishop captures on d6, you would have to give up a piece just to connect your rooks, and only after bishop captures on e7, now you play king to g8, and okay, now the game continues, probably with something like a threefold repetition here. Queen g3, king f8, queen to d6, check king g7, queen g3, and so on and so on. It would be a nice draw. But now Naroditsky played c captures on b5, which looks perfectly natural, but now it is Magnus who's winning. Knight b to d5 attacks the queen and the bishop. We have queen to d2, and knight captures on b4. Queen captures on b4, and just rook captures on c6. This is what Daniel missed, and that's why the previous line was necessary. He's no longer winning. He's now just dead lost. But he finds ways to complicate, or maybe, so we think. And also look at this, the bishop on c2 is hanging. So he plays bishop to b3, and now Magnus is completely winning unless he plays the move that he actually played in the game. So here you just play rook b6, and that's it. You have no worries here. There is nothing white can do. And it doesn't even seem possible for white to make any sort of progress here, or maybe even threats. But Magnus played rook to c5, which seems like, it's almost the same, because the b pawn is attacked, and maybe you even control more space here on the 5th rank. But now he allowed this, pawn to b6. And it seems like there's no reason to allow this. But what did Magnus miss? I'm pretty sure you see it. But just in case you don't, I will show it. Obviously, if queen captures, you weaken the back rank. So we're going to capture with the bishop. But now the problem is you can give up the queen. You no longer need it. And after queen captures, just a nice rook to a8 with check. And once you give up everything, it's going to be checkmate. Queen, you give up the queen, you give up the rook, you give up the knight, and of course, it's checkmate. So that is a big problem for Magnus. But okay, he just allowed the passed b pawn to start marching forward. Obviously, it can't be like a catastrophe. He just plays pawn to g6, and now rook to a7, which a couple of moves ago was a sacrifice, but now it's not, as the pawn is on b6. Rook to h7. Now you also have to defend the f7 pawn. Don't forget about that. We have pawn to b7. Another beautiful move by Daniel, saying that, okay, you can have my rook. I'm just going to have another queen. And even capturing the rook here and allowing another queen into the game would be better than what Magnus played. Here, it's still a draw, but to draw this, you have to find a really, really, a move you really don't want to play. Just for fun, even try to find this move which holds the position for black. Have at it. No doubt you found it, as you guys are such amazing players, but just for a couple of you that haven't, bishop to a5. This is the move you have to play, and I mean, what is this? Looks like it shouldn't be possible. But now rook captures on a5 has to be played, and then you just play rook captures on a5. For example, rook captures, queen captures, and queen captures on b7, and now you can hold this. Because if after this you play something like rook to a8, then bishop captures on b4, rook captures on b8 with check, king g7, but now you don't really have a good way of doing things, because if rook to g8 with check, which seems like a great idea, you're getting a queen into the game, then you just capture that rook with the knight, and after b8 queen, you also capture the rook on e1. Yes, you have a queen, but black has two rooks, a knight, and the bishop, so there's really nothing to look for here. So crazy move, but yeah, bishop to a5 was needed to hold the position here. Magnus played rook to c7, which is not the way to go, and now he allows rook to a8. and not a lot to be done here. You could play rook captures on b7, but trading queens here isn't really, achieving all that much. You're down the exchange. You have one extra pawn, but you're down in exchange. So this would be winning for Daniel. So after rook a8, he tried queen captures on b7, but now it's even more winning for Daniel. Queen captures on d6 with check, king to g7, and now Naroditsky is completely winning. But what do you play here? Is it simple? Is it complicated? He does have 26 seconds on the clock, so you can take that much if you want. The only move that wins is not queen captures on d8. It's actually rook captures on d8. With rook captures on d8, you have the threat of queen f8 checkmate remains, and there's just not much you can do about it. Now, black cannot capture the bishop on b3, as this would be checkmate. Magnus probably thought it's all the same. Naroditsky thought it's all the same. Played queen captures on d8, but now Magnus just figures it out. Queen to b4. Look at this beautiful move. Defends checkmate and attacks the rook on e1. And remember, Naroditsky is down material, so he has to checkmate Magnus somehow. Queen b4, we have rook e to a1, doubling up on the a file, and now just rook d7. Magnus consolidates, and now he's looking to pressure Naroditsky by playing pawn to h4, pawn to h3. So queen to c8, and look at this, pawn to h4. We have pawn to h3 and rook to h5. Now the rook comes into the game as well, and it seems there's nothing for Daniel to look for here. We have bishop to d1. He plays this one move with both of them being below 10 seconds on the clock, and Magnus in a completely equal position, but of course that's easy to say when you're not the one playing, played queen to d6. And now his position is just lost. So what did Magnus miss here? Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Daniel while I give you a couple of seconds. Of course, Magnus missed bishop captures on h5, and I don't think he even saw the checkmate, because if had he seen it, he would play g captures on h5. With g captures on h5, okay, you're much worse, but you can still play like queen to h8 check. You go to g6, and then okay, something like rook a 8 to a6 attacks the queen. You can move the queen, and okay, it's still lost for black, but you can still play. I mean, if you haven't seen it. But after bishop captures on h5, Magnus just played knight captures on h5, and now, well, I would be insulting you if I ask you to pause the video. Of course, you all see it. Magnus defended the f8 square by playing queen to d6, but he completely missed that queen to h8 is now checkmate. And we have this very weird checkmate. I don't think anyone ever checkmated Magnus like this. There is a rook on a1, there's a rook on a8, and there's a queen on h8. Very, a very geometrical experience, no doubt, to be on the receiving end of such a position. Beautifully played by both of them. They were both winning. They were both lost. In the end, someone had to win, and that someone was Daniel Naroditsky, who won a very nice game against the best player in the world, Magnus Carlsen. Nothing in the world beats creativity, but, sometimes if you want to play really fast, like, for example, Daniel did here, where, after a move like a3 and a couple of more moves, he found this bishop to c2. Maybe he didn't know this position exactly. Maybe he knew similar ones, as, I have no idea how much theory he knows, probably most of it. It's easy to find winning chances even against Magnus Carlsen. So, you can rely purely on creativity, but if you want to give yourself a head start, I suggest you try out Lotus Chess. I've been using it for since the first time I recommended it. First link in the description below. You will learn cool lines. You will learn attacking chess. You will be able to play like Bobby Fischer. Not at that level, but, using creative lines, maybe even at that level, if you have it within you, but you will never know if you don't try. So try it. First link in the description below. It's amazing. That's all I have to say. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And of course, I would like to thank Peter Albert, Rajesh Kota, Phil Bauer, Fischer Exteriors, and Tafadza Naguaru for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. And I will already said the outro. So have a great day. See you soon.